The Democratic Party prides itself on being inclusive and advocating for communities of color. But there was a time when racism was at the center of its policies. The Democratic Party began in the early 1800s under Andrew Jackson. It was founded on the belief that democracy should be for all men, not just the elites and landowners. Well, all white men, that is. The party was more than happy for slavery to continue, and it treated Native Americans with brutal contempt. As president, Jackson enforced one of the cruelest policies in American history when he signed the Indian Removal Act into law. White people wanted to settle on native lands, so the Democratic government uprooted Native Americans from their homelands, forcing them to travel west. More than 5,000 natives died during this displacement, now known as the Trail of Tears. By the mid-1800s, a rift in the party emerged over a simple question: should the United States extend slavery to the Western territories? This issue broke the party into two groups: the Southern Democrats, who wanted to expand slavery, and the Northern Democrats, who said the states should decide. That led each side to offer their own candidate in the 1860 presidential election, which ultimately split their vote and allowed Abraham Lincoln, the candidate of the recently formed Republican Party, to win. And these first Republicans, they were against slavery. This, of course, led to the Civil War, which lasted from 1861 to 1865. Meanwhile, the Democrats labeled themselves as the white man's party, attacking the Republican Party as the party for the Negro. As they gained power in the South during Reconstruction, Southern Democrats embraced this mantra, creating the Black Codes. This set of laws kept white supremacy alive by limiting Black Americans' right to property and forcing them to work in low-wage jobs. In Mississippi, one law fined people for unlawfully assembling themselves. The Ku Klux Klan was founded during this time, with some of its members being Southern Democrats. But while the Klan was never officially aligned with the political party, it terrorized Black Southerners. One expert explains their view on this relationship between the Klan and the Democratic Party.
The KKK was not an official organ of the Democratic Party, but it espoused very similar white supremacist views. But the KKK was relatively short-lived during the Reconstruction period.
By the turn of the 20th century, the Democratic Party still controlled the South, and things started to change for it in the North. The party gained more popularity due to its focus on economic growth amid the Great Depression. And a gradual shift in the Democratic Party's identity came in part as Democratic politicians like Harry S. Truman adopted pro-civil rights platforms in the mid-20th century.
This shift begins in the 1930s under Franklin Delano Roosevelt during the Great Depression, not because Roosevelt adopted a civil rights platform, he didn't, but because the federal government, for the first time through the New Deal programs, actually providing aid and assistance to African Americans. And in 1934, in the midterm elections, for the first time in the history of the country, the African American vote shifted from being predominantly Republican to being predominantly Democratic.
Democratic President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act into law. Black voters started to go Democrat, while white Southerners strayed from the party.
Even in the era after the adoption of the Civil Rights Act of '64 and the Voting Rights Act of '65, voting rights for minorities remains precarious, except the players have changed. Today is the Democratic Party that sponsors voting rights for minorities.
They've still had recent missteps, like their support of mass incarceration under Bill Clinton. And while the party has adopted more progressive platforms and did nominate this nation's first Black president,
thank you. God bless you. And may God bless the United States of America.
We know that there's still a long way to go.
Thank you. God bless you. And may God bless the United States.